Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. I was reliving with the MCs. My first trip to Australia ended with the organizer of the conference shouting and pointing his finger at me. So I hope not to make that kind of trouble today. It's gonna be peaceful. I'll tell you that story at aforementioned karaoke. First, to head off any disappointment, I don't really use slides, but I had caused Trish enough problems already in my slowness to like book travel and all these things. I didn't want to show up and have nothing and then have someone like panic. So this is my one and only slide. I hope you enjoy it. So a few things as it gets started. I have given a lot of talks in the Ruby community. I think my first conference talk was 2008. And so, yeah, I guess like the question is, do I have anything left to say after all these years? After a few years of giving conference talks, I realized that there was often a theme of, you're doing it wrong. Here's how to be as smart as me. And I decided I'm not going to do that anymore because I don't really know that much. So why stand up here and tell you, like, you're wrong, I'm so smart. Instead, let me reverse it and say, I'm so dumb, don't be as dumb as me. And that was kind of the genesis of this talk and the thinking behind it. As we think about like making mistakes and learning lessons, right? That's essentially the engine of evolution, right? Is to like learn from the mistakes of others. So I wanted to share with you some of my favorite or perhaps least favorite mistakes of the past 10 years of starting and running small businesses. I hope that it applies to you, whether maybe you run a business, maybe you're a consultant, maybe you're one of everyone else who's thinking like, I could quit this job and start my own thing. I could totally make it work. And maybe a few of my mistakes you can avoid. As mentioned by the MCs, if you would, it's kind of funny when you give a talk like this. My wife will often text me afterwards, like, how'd it go? And I'm like, well, they clapped. So I didn't get like booed off stage. But you never know if it's any good or if people paid any attention. Two ways that you could like tremendously honor mine and other talks would be, number one, if you took notes. So if we were at my school, I would tell you, like, close your computer. I'm glad there are no tables here. And I see actually 0 computers, which is pretty impressive. So kudos to you. If you have a piece of paper, would love for you to like use a pen. And as you can see, I have modeled this technique. So thank you for bringing a notebook. Part 2 is if you don't like writing, you can't even read your own handwriting. Is if there's anything like real interesting that stands out to you in my talk or other talks, would love for you to tweet it. You can mention me. It's at J3. It only costs you 3 characters. So you have 136, including the space, in order to write down some garbage or argue with what I had to say. And as we're talking about mistakes, if I hit one that you yourself have experienced or perhaps have near-miss experienced, I would love for you to show your agreement, your support with a groan of enthusiasm, just as loud as you can, like, ugh. Perhaps we could practice, if you don't mind, on 3. 1, 2, 3. It's flawless. I love it. All right. So number 1, we step back to 2006. I'm just a young man teaching high school and teaching computer science and trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing and just really enjoying things. And like all of you, I'm sure, I had this lady that I kind of knew. And she said, Jeff, I need a website. I said, no problem. I know how to make these things. And she said, I'm going to run for a school board, and I want to make a site that collects donations. Okay, now I want you to remember 2006, this is a primitive age before Stack Overflow and whatnot, where you had to like read your own documentation, and you couldn't just count on the generosity of others to solve your problems for you. And I said, okay, I can build this. I took a look at it. I'm going to do a Maps integration. I'm going to use PayPal on the back end. They've got this active merchant gem that's just come out, and I've heard it's hot. And I can build this for $5,000. And she says, okay, great, let's do it. So I work. And it's summer vacation. As a teacher, you get this couple weeks. And work on this project, and I'm like keeping them updated. I'm like, hey, yeah, it's coming along. Here's our finish date, and you won't believe it's actually shifted on the day it was due. Okay, the day I had set out. And so we thank you. It was a one-time miracle. And then about a week later, I sent him the invoice. Dun dun. And they say, yeah, can we have a call? Uh-huh. They say, yeah, I was, this is exact quote, I was talking to my cousin, and he said he could probably have built the site for $500 instead of $5,000. And I said, that's very interesting. Kudos to your cousin. So we'd like to pay you $500. And I said, fuck. Okay. And yeah, thank you. So first lesson learned is get the money first. Get the money first. And it's easy to say, just like, oh, just tell them they have to pay you beforehand. But I eventually stumbled on a technique that actually works fabulously, which is to raise your rates by about 20%, and then give them the quote, and then they're like, and you go, well, we do offer a 10% discount for prepayment. And then they say, oh, a bargain? Everyone loves a bargain. Sign it up. Now you also made an extra 10%. Lesson number 2. 2007, I started a middle school, which in the US is like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And me and a couple friends, we started working hard on this middle school. It was my first startup, if you will. And like all startups, my job was to do all the jobs. So I was in charge of things like suspending kids, setting our schedules. And when a young lady broke her leg in PE class, I was in charge of carrying her to the front door while we waited for the ambulance. And the day after that, I remember having this like kind of ache in my stomach. And being, I think I was like 26 at this time, I was like, I'm fine. And then a week or two later, I was like, man, this doesn't feel so good. I wonder if I got like a hernia or something. But it's March. I don't really have time. I'll wait till summer. And then 2 weeks later, it still hurt, and I said, all right, I'm going to go to the doctor. You know, where is that? Oh, well, I should explain. I'm not sure if you've heard of the US. We have like a kind of fucked up healthcare situation. And I was like, I'm not sure if I have a health insurance card. Where is that card? And I went to our office manager, who was her first time being an office manager. I said, yeah, Gina, I don't think I got my health insurance card. And she's like, you didn't enroll for health insurance. And I was like, definitely enrolled for health insurance. And she's like, oh, yeah, I think I forgot to file it. It's like, okay, cool. No big deal. And we also have these old windows where you can file things like this. And she's like, oh, yeah, we can file it on May 1st. And it's March now. And I'm like, no problem. I can make it. So we're going along. Still hurts. Gets to May 1st. And she's like, bad news. It turns out it's filed May 1st, but it's not active till June 1st. I'm like, all right, it's been like 3 months. I got this. Maybe I could just like push it back in. I'll be okay. And went on vacation with some friends, and I couldn't wake up. It was like we were in the mountains for the weekend, and I was just so sleepy. And as we drive home, my wife was driving, and at this point, we finally had like iPhones and things. And I had been watching Lost, which is known for its like accuracy and scientific virtue. And it occurred to me that in the episode I had just watched, literally that week, Dr. Jack got appendicitis and operated on himself, which is ridiculous. And so I start reading on this newfangled Wikipedia about appendicitis, as you do when you get sick in the US, you turn to the internet. And they're like, oh, the test for appendicitis is you press on your appendix and it hurts, but then when you let go, it hurts more. And I was like, that's really weird. And so I go to the hospital, they start their tests, and you know when the doctor goes from the like, to the like, and they're like, well, it's very good you came in. You're in the process of going into a coma. And I said, like, okay, so what now? And then they said, well, we're going to juice you up with some high-power antibiotics, spend a month in the hospital. Everything is okay. In the end, it cost me a cool $50,000. So don't get sick in the US, in case I didn't mention that enough times. And but what I realized after the fact was that in our day-to-day grind, in doing all the startup jobs and getting so excited about the things we were building, we were really neglecting the little important things, you know, and the little things that are so easy to skip over. And and whatnot. Thank God that it's counting down, Ryan. I thought it was counting up. I was like, how has it been 35 minutes? I'm only on number 3. All right. Number 3, so I'm back the next school year, and hiring teachers was one of my jobs. And I knew this lady from an old school and went and observed her. And teaching is a lot like programming. You know, when you watch somebody in their element, it's just like, oh, this person, they are the one. They are the best. And I hired her. And when she was in class, she was the history teacher that had kids like wearing hats and like just totally engaged in everything they were doing. And it was so awesome. And as soon as class ended and the students left the room, complain about this, complain about that, complain about this. And we said to ourselves, we can work this out. It's worth it. She's so good in the classroom that we have to make it. I'm not sure if any of you have ever worked with developers, but there are probably some folks who you've said to yourself before, they're so good. They crank out 20% more code than everybody else. Even though, well, yeah, they're annoying. Well, yeah, no one wants to work with them, but they're so productive. And what we learned over that year, and one of the things that's hard about teaching is that you have these like fixed cycles, right? You can't just replace somebody in the middle of the year. You kind of have to make it through the year. But really the hard takeaway that I learned there was like the skill is not worth it. If you ever find yourself saying like, this person is so good, this other bad stuff, it's worth it, it's never worth it because of the corrosive effect on everyone else in the team. And the longer you try and make it work, what you're doing is showing the rest of your team, this is the kind of behavior that's acceptable. This is the kind of attitude that's acceptable with what we do. And ever since then, I've focused really hard in hiring on agency. How does a person believe that they are able to create change, right? Because that's essentially what a complainer does, is they have given up their agency. They've said, like, I'm just here. I'm suffering under the weight of this administration, under the weight of this leadership. But your best employees are the ones that say, here's a problem, right? It's not about sweeping things under the rug. Here's a problem. Let's figure out how to solve it. Number 4, left teaching. 2009, started a little company called Jumpstart Lab. And my wife was pregnant with our first child at the time. Great time to quit your job, P.S. And I talked to some friends, and I said, I think I want to bring this teaching thing to adults. I'm going to offer some classes on the weekends, or maybe on the weeknights, and people who are secretaries, people who work in nonprofits, people who do whatever, they can come and they can learn some things about programming, they can automate parts of their job, and like every system administrator, they can try and realize the dream of automating your job so they can play World of Warcraft at work. And my friends were all like, that's great. I'll send my whole team. I know 100 people who will sign up for that. And I said, 100? That's so great. Let's do it. Quit the job, lease the office, write the curriculum, tickets on sale, come and get them. I think I know this one person who might be interested. And it was just like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're in the pattern of someone else paying your paychecks, it's very easy to underrate just how hard it is to get people to pay you money. And you have probably thought to yourself, like, I could build this thing. I could build a so-and-so replacement. I could build a New Relic replacement. I could build replacement for this other tool. And I'll get these people. They'll start paying me their $15 a month, and I'll be rich, hanging out at the beach, dying in the riptide. The reality is that until people pay the money, they don't want it. Every person that you talk to, until there is money changing hands, they don't actually want it, no matter what they say, because there's this perverse conversation that's happening where you're saying, hey, I want to do this thing. It's going to be so great. Doesn't this sound great? And that person wants you to do it. They want you to believe in yourself. They want to be supportive. And they say, I would totally buy that. They're not really thinking it through of like, well, that would cost me X dollars per year. Well, I'd have to replace this thing. I'd have to get approval from this other person, right? If you're thinking about starting a thing, until money changes hands, no one has proven that they want it, right? So what's the fix? The easy fix is sell it before you have it, right? When we started up some new classes in the future, we'd say, hey, yeah, 3 months from now, we're going to offer this class. It's going to be so great. P.S. We didn't make it yet, or we didn't write the curriculum, whatever. This is what we're going to do. Tickets are going to be X dollars, $750. But if you buy it now, we'll sell it to you for $500. Either people say no, in which case you realize not only is this idea shit, it's so bad they won't even buy it for 1/3 off, or they buy it, and then you're like, oh, it works, and I have some money, and now I have time to go make the thing. You can always sell a thing before it exists, and if they won't buy it before it exists, they won't buy it when it does exist either. Number 5, 2012. I started a program called Hungry Academy. I had this conversation with a good friend. He was some of you might have met Chad Fowler before. He was the VP of engineering at Living Social. And he said, if you had great people who didn't know anything about programming, how long would it take you to turn them into proficient software developers? I said, 6 months. He said, well, I have budget for 5 months. I said, 5 months it is. And we didn't really know if this was a thing that could be done. I actually have a computer science degree, I know, please don't throw me out. And that was hard fought over years, but I felt like I hadn't used a lot of the things that I spent so much time studying. And maybe we could just cut down to the most interesting, to the most focused pieces and really ramp people up. And we worked super hard. It was me and one co-teacher, friend Matt Yoho, and we worked harder than I'd ever worked on anything before. And it was 6.5 days a week. It was 12-hour days. It was writing lesson plans minutes before delivering them to students. And as we got to the end, our goal in having 24 students, Living Social was hoping to hire between 12 and 16 of the 24 students. And as we got to the end, they decided to hire all 24. And so they finished and they signed their job contracts. And I remember sitting in the office just feeling this relief. Like, we did it, we crushed it, of course. And can you believe we got here? Like, how awesome was that? And Matt turned to me and he said, I'm going to work at GitHub. And I said, huh? What? And as I looked at his face, I realized that in service of the work, I had not paid any attention to the two of us. And I had spent nearly 10 years at that point working in public schools, working in environments where I had no resources. I was expected to work a ton of hours. And I had really built up this kind of scar tissue for that style of work. And then I realized Matt, coming from a developer background, that wasn't his style. He was accustomed to doing his work, getting paid, and going home. And I didn't, because we were such good friends and we were doing something that was important, I just kind of assumed that if we were successful, that meant we were happy. And there was actually a big gap between being successful. We were successful, but Matt wasn't happy. And I cried in the office, and it was I thought this was a thing we were building, that the two of us were going to be together for 5-10 years. And I realized that because I was so focused on where we were going, I didn't pay any attention to the person next to me and how I just essentially worked him to the ground. And the replacement cost of good people is tremendous, The people that we work with and the people that we build up around us really are the asset. I've talked to some teams before and said, if you could take the best people on your team, and I hope that's your whole team, and throw away your product, whatever your product is, just throw it away. Would you start a new product with these same people? And the answer is often yes, at least most of them. And well, whoever's not on that list, you need to get them out now. But that's the thing that's super interesting to me, and I think what we're starting to see now, 10 years into this kind of Ruby Rails community or this larger dev community, and the thing I try and tell my students over and over is you're going to be on teams, blow up those teams, recombine those teams with the same people for the rest of your career. Almost all of them go and work at a company where there's somebody that I know, somebody I met at a conference, somebody who I did some work with at Living Social, somebody who I met from somewhere. And it's not like I probably know more people than average, but still, it's a small, small world that we're operating in. And you can't afford to burn those few other people that are on this little journey with you. We have to push really hard as we're building great things and building great teams and building great companies. But we have to keep the people happy. And one of the revelations to me about that was that this idea of burnout. I have, in the past, I have complex feelings, I would say, on burnout. On one hand, I get it. There are times that I don't feel creative. But then at the other hand, I look at my old students and some of their parents and people who are cleaning offices at night, people who are dumping trash cans 5 days a week, and they don't get to say well, I'm tired of these trash cans. I'd like some new trash cans, right? It's an incredible privilege that we even have this idea of being burned out. Oh, I'm going to take a couple months off from my typing. It's so tiring, right? But the reality is that burnout is an emotional problem, not a physical problem. Yet we try and so often solve it with physical means, right? Oh, you're burned out. Oh, take a week off. That's a physical solution for an emotional problem, right? And emotional problems, I think, are slow to develop and slow to solve. And so if we're not paying attention to them all the time, it's not possible for us to go 8-week sprint, let's go nuts, and then we're going to take a week off kind of thing. It doesn't really work that way. We have to be paying attention to our emotional health, to our emotional growth all the time, and then build up the fortitude that can really handle the way that we want to press. Being sustainable all the time. Number 6. So in 2013, we had wrapped up Hungry Academy, and I got, someone's phone is here. They're getting Slack messages. In 2013, I formed a partnership out in Denver, Colorado, and wanted to start the next program, start the thing that was going to be my forever thing, my 20-year kind of lifetime crowning achievement thing. And met these business folks and just kind of got the ball rolling. It was exciting. They were going to take care of the financials, the parts that I found the least interesting and most concerning. And I was just going to deliver the content and curriculum. And I said, great. My mom is a lawyer. She's a tax lawyer. And when it came around to doing our contract and so forth to set up the business, she looked, as she's always done for me because I had no money, or often had no money, she always took care of all my legal stuff. That's what moms are supposed to do. So she did. We went back and forth. We made some edits. We got things rolling, and that was January 2013. And by March 2013, do the math, that's very shortly thereafter, I said, you know what? This partnership, this is not a forever thing. In fact, I'd like this to end as soon as possible. Differences of vision, differences of kind of approach, and said, I have made a mistake. I know that's going to cost me. That's the nature of making business mistakes, but let's fix it. And at this point, I knew that my mom was probably not the right person for the job. I reached out to some friends and said, hey, I think I might be in a tough spot. Can you recommend me a lawyer? One of them had a fancy pants San Francisco lawyer. I flew out there, brought him the thing, and it reminds me a little bit of that same doctor conversation. He's reading through the contract and not saying anything, just making little marks next to it. But he kind of goes, And I'm sitting there please, just tell me it's going to be okay. And he says, I wish you had called me before you signed this. And I'm I also wish that I called you. That's explicitly why I'm here. And there were some hard lessons learned in our conversations and in the battle that would follow after that. I ended up selling my half of the company for $1. That's how bad I wanted to get out. And that's about the strength of position that I had put myself in with that contract. And I realized that contracts We write them when we're in love, and we use them when we're in hate. And no one enters into a contract, or few of us enter into a contract, whether it's an employment contract or a partnership contract or whatever it is, without excitement, right? It's like, let's get this paperwork out of the way. I don't even need to read this. I'm sure someone else read it. Let's sign it, right? And since that time, every time I touch a contract, I try and imagine, what would it be like when I hate your guts and you hate my guts? And I'm like, you know what I'd like you to do? Drop dead. How then would I read this paragraph? How then would I read about this intellectual property? How then would I read about the non-compete? How then would I read about the leave policy? Because when you need that paper is only going to be when you hate each other. And the risk is so huge to you, particularly if you're in the role of creating things. You write them when you're in love, you use them when you're in hate. And the part that I realized was so dumb is that, like most small business people, I was always trying to minimize expenses and had moms check out that contract. But there's a difference between recurring and one-time expenses. Recurring expenses, yeah, you got to try and keep those low. But one-time expenses, things like reviewing a contract when you're setting up a new business, the difference between paying somebody $250 and paying somebody $2,000 in the length of that business is basically zero. And so from then on, I said, whenever I'm doing something important, look at, is it a one-time cost? If it's a one-time cost, figure out the best I can get and then one notch up from that. What's ridiculous to spend on this? Because it needs to be done correctly. There's no room for error. Overspend on those one-time expenses. So number 7, we start duking out this partnership. And, whenever you have conflict, I always believe conflict comes from both sides. It's never I did everything correctly and the other side, they were just jerks. And as we started these negotiations and conversations back and forth, and there's all this tension and frustration, and I kept wondering, is it me? What if I'm the asshole and they're cool? And if that were the case, then I could just fix it. I could just stop being an asshole. I could look at the things I would do. And of course, you talk to people and you talk to friends and you try and get their feedback, but few of them, maybe if you have a spouse, but few of your friends will be yes, you're being an asshole. And so I searched for this, how do I just fix this? How do I dissolve the problem? How do I take this Gordian knot approach and just cut through? And I talked to a friend who's been kind of a mentor over the years, Peter Bell, who's in New York. Maybe some of you have met him before. And he said, Jeff, you made one of the first mistakes of being in tech. And I said, okay, Peter, once again, whatever is coming, you could have told me this several years ago. He said, there are 2 kinds of people in technology. There are people who make things, and there are people who make money on the people who make things. And you're a person who makes things, and you partnered up with people who wanted to make money by exploiting the things that you make. And I was just fuck. Yeah, thanks. You're completely correct. And he was don't do that. Okay. And so the takeaway from there is that I think one of the great things about programming, and more importantly, the people that programming attracts, is that programming is about creating things. It's about discovery and finding and building things and how fun that is. And even often just the fun of the act of creation, whether or not the thing you create has value. And I think it's neat when you look at this room, at this Australia Ruby community that is kind of legendary for its cohesion and enthusiasm around programming. If there's no Ruby, if there's no Rails, if there's no whatever, these are still your people, right? These are the people that, like you, are into creating things. And those are the people that you want to stick with. I think there's a real danger for the other people. And they're probably not all bad people. Some of them, yes. But you don't really need them anymore. And I think I don't think the developer class it has really come to grips with that just yet. Like 10 years ago, you want to take your web app, even a Rails app, and you're going to ship it on your light HTTPD, and you're going to spend days like debugging the configuration and talking to Ezra Zygmunt-Tovich about how that even works. And then you got to lease all these servers and have all this upfront cost, right? And now, of course, like Heroku is so passé. My students, they get frustrated with Heroku, and they're like, "Oh, Heroku's broken." I'm like, "How dare you?" Like, you do not speak poorly about the Heroku, okay? When our battle scars are deep and like you know nothing. You don't need those business people the way they need you. And like while the industry continues to obsess about like acquisition this and VC investment that, like if your interest is in building things, with the possible exception of like hardware, if you're super into like IoT, maybe you need a little bit of money. But other than that, like you don't need their money. You can choose to architect your business, your technology in a way that does it without them. And you'll never regret that independence. Number 8. So 2014, we start this Turing school. And end of 2014, the first graduates finish up. And they go out in the job market. And these folks, we've just spent 7 months training them up to be professional software developers. And we put them out there and we're like, "Here you go, world." And that was December. In January, only about a quarter of them had jobs. I said, no big deal. Holidays, who hires over the winter holidays? February, it was up to about half. And so I had half of people that were like, "Hey, I thought the jobs were going to come like raining down upon me, and I'm sitting here and nobody wants to talk to me." And it got to March, and I said, like, "Oh, shit, like we have a problem." It turns out that just being good at programming and the associated things around it is not enough to get you a job. That you as a little jabroni who 7 months ago was waiting tables or baking cookies or whatever you were doing, and now you're out in this field with people who look kind of like you, people who also have no professional experience, who also claim that they know how to program. And my students would say, like, "But I'm like, you told me I graduated, like, I think I'm pretty good." And I'm like, "I think you're pretty good too." And I realized that I had made a mistake that I had made before, which is like a good product doesn't sell itself. And of the like builder class, we want to believe in the like virtue of quality, right? And if we just do it correctly, we do it better than everybody else, they'll come banging down our door. They'll come signing up for our SaaS. They'll come demanding our consulting hours, whatever it is. And marketing and PR, that's gross. That's what recruiters do and stuff. Just kidding. P.S. Any recruiters want to hire some people? I have some people. So marketing and PR is gross, but then I realized like when we don't do those things, we're really like disrespecting our work. It's the equivalent, right, of the artist who paints a beautiful picture and then tucks it in their closet. And is like, one day someone will find this. And that's what we're doing. Even if you build this little 3-page landing page with your pricing structure and your checklist about how your features are better, no one's coming digging in your closet. And if you don't do the outreach, if you don't do the marketing, if you don't do the PR or hire some really great folks to do that for you, your thing's gonna stay in that closet. And then you're gonna get into a dark place where you start saying like, I worked so hard on this thing, I'm pretty sure it's so good, no one else wants it. Is it that they don't want that or they don't want me? And now you get into like emotional turmoil, you get into business turmoil, partnership turmoil, and it's gonna be a bad place. So I think as developers, we have to kind of like get over ourselves a little bit and say like marketing, sales, PR, that's not just like a thing we have to do, like going to the dentist once in a while. It's a thing that we should be excited about because it's how we expose our cool thing to all the people that need it. And if we don't do that, then we're disrespecting the thing that we built. Quality won't sell itself. Number 9, 2015. We got those people jobs, for the record, 98%. 2015, we're now up to 18 staff, 95 students, 100 plus graduates. And we're talking a little bit last night up top of the building about back in the day when you would go to a conference like this, and there would always be a talk about GitHub and how GitHub's management structures or lack thereof was always better than whatever you were doing, and how you were like antiquated and stupid. And one of the things that would get repped frequently was like, no one's ever left, no one's ever quit from GitHub. And number one, times have changed. Number two, that might not have been true at the time. There's debate about that. But number three, the most important part is like, that's probably not good. And as I look at our staff of 18, just in the 18 months of Turing's existence, we've had 4 people who left or were asked to leave. And so then I had the question, like, is that a failure? Does that mean that I picked the wrong people? And what I realized is yes and no. Of course, there's some failure. You don't want to like bring folks in and then just turn around and lose them. But in a small company, in a startup, you're in an environment of change, right? And the needs of that startup, the needs of that company, or the needs of that team even, are going to change quickly. Some folks are set up well for that change. Some folks are not. And if you have a team of 8, 9, 10 people, at least as far as I've seen, it is almost impossible that all of them want to and are well suited to make the change that the organization needs. If you're not losing people along the way, you're probably either doing the company or the people a disservice. There are probably people who are hanging in there because they don't want to be the one to quit the band, right? But the reality is like they're not happy anymore. It's not the thing they loved when you were X size and now you're X squared size, and it's like annoying to them. It's frustrating. It's overwhelming to them. And so then I kept thinking about this and talking to other like entrepreneurs of like how do we work with this? How do we identify with it? How do we push through it? And I got a great quote from a friend. He said, as an entrepreneur, as a person who builds things, you have to be in love with a problem, not with a solution. Falling in love with your solution is dangerous. It gives you tunnel vision. It pushes you down this one path. But if you fall in love with your problem, and if people on your team fall in love with the problem, then they see that the solution is just the least bad idea we've had yet, right? And that they're skeptical of that solution. That we're always skeptical. We're collecting data, we're collecting feedback, we're seeing what's wrong with it, and we're changing it, or we're even ready to throw it out at any given time. That we have to value adaptability. And part of that means adaptability from the team side to let people go or to tell them when it's no longer a fit for them. And that doesn't have to mean that it was a mistake to have them. It doesn't mean that they're bad people or that you're a bad team. It just means that it's not the best thing for the work. And if you're in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, or perhaps in hate with the problem that you're trying to solve, then having the wrong people, it's obvious that that's not going to work. You have to be ready to change your solution. So then number 10, the most recent, just a few months ago, as we kind of scale up this company, I started feeling bad for myself, to be honest about it. When I used to have 24 students at a time, we had them for 6 months. I would recruit them, I'd interview them, I'd select them, train them, and help them find jobs and really get to like live their whole life cycle. And now that I have 94 students, we're soon going to grow to 180 students, I miss that like depth of connection that we used to have. And I said, boo-hoo-hoo for me. I still teach the first quarter of our class, or I have taught the first quarter of our class. And so I still get to know them, get to know their names, get to know a bit about their stories. But like back in the day, I used to get to know their kids and know their significant others and like just be so in their business. And then at Christmas time, the staff gave me a card. And I opened the card. I waited till I got home because like who knows what's in there. And I get home, and it was the first thing I do. I open the card. And whenever you get those group cards, you always expect it to be like, have a great Christmas, Andrew. And the quotes were along the lines of, thanks for building this thing that changed my whole life. And the whole card was full of them from all these people. And first off, I cried because I'm a dad. Dadding makes you super soft if you haven't mommed or dad yet. Warning, all of a sudden, like movie trailers, you're like, oh, it's so gripping. And so I'm standing there in my entryway, and I'm like crying at my house. And I realized, like, oh shit. Like, I was so dumb. I was focused on how I like no longer get to have this relationship with the students, the people that I'm so invested in their success, that I didn't realize there's this whole group of people just begging me to be like continue to be invested in their success. And like their success was coming ancillary to the student success, right? But then it was just like, oh, now I get it. Right? The team are now my people. Like these are the ones that I have to build up so that they can build up everyone else. I had been selfish because I had been focused on the solution. I knew how to teach. I knew how to show up to class and do it better than everybody else. And I was so focused on that solution, I didn't realize that the people here are what really needed my attention. I started to realize like leadership isn't about building the solutions, it's about building the people that build the solutions. That was number 10. Close it up. In October, my best friend was killed in a cycling accident. And of course, like one of those moments you'll never forget, you get the text message, and spent a lot of the next like weeks kind of sitting and thinking about a lot of different issues of life. He was working at the White House, and when his mom went to his office to clean up his desk, she found this Post-it on his monitor that said, "Cultivate the cuirass." And none of us knew what that meant. It was not his password, P.S., for those who are concerned. And so we started reading, researching, and the word cuirass comes from Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle. And in the novel, he talks about the cuirass as this network of people connected in a common spirit. And this friend, Jake, he was the connector. He was the person that would like come in the room and knew everyone's name and everyone's significant other's name, knew like everything about you. And thinking about like cultivate the cuirass, cultivate the network of people that are around you. In his wake, somebody who worked for him, said there was no feeling in the world like when Jake believed in you, and he always believed in you, and there was no pressure in the world like trying to live up to those expectations. And as I think about like people and networks and like what we're trying to build like beyond the software, it makes me realize that like our cuirass, like the people that we choose to surround ourselves with, the most important thing is to spend our time with people who believe in a version of you more powerful, more capable, more highly accomplished than you are ready to believe in, and then working as hard as we can to live up to their expectations. To listen to those people, to share with them, to be vulnerable with them, and to do good work. And that's it. Notebook over.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was fantastic.
Technically, I have 90 seconds. I could take like one question, if you don't object to questions.
Have we got one question?
Or like two questions.
A single question, first person to put up their hand?
All right.
No?
All questions.
All right.
So, given the talk was about making mistakes, I'm going to go a little bit for the opposite. What was a time when you hired or took on someone and saw their growth that you were really proud of?
Every day. I mean, to be honest, like that's a kind of cheesy answer, but there are so many, like the privilege of our work is that we get to see people go through this like amazing transformation, you know. So one of our favorite stories is a lady, Allie, who was the girlfriend of one of our former students. We convinced her to apply for the program. She was making cookies at Whole Foods, and she made so many cookies every day that she couldn't feel her fingertips. You know, which is just this perverse thing. Like you think of making cookies with your mom or something, you're like, oh, it's so fun. And she's like literally breaking her body making cookies. And she quit on Thursday. She applied on Thursday, got in, quit her job on Friday, Monday started the program, and then 7 months later, she was a professional software developer. She was number 1 in her class, you know? And it's not surprising in the first weeks of learning to see how people who have some experience, people who did some programming, whatever, of course, they start out at the top of the class. But what it has been surprising is as we like improve the educational program and model and so forth, is to see how people who came in with like nothing at all, like maybe they can type and that's it, can often come out in the like top performing students, and they go off and like live these fabulous lives and have great, you know, paychecks, and they enjoy what they work, and like she can feel her fingers again. You know, that's cool. Anything else burning?
We've got.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff.